All right, all. Another example of something that we didn't talk much about, but I want you to understand it's in here, whether we use it or not, a lot. Um, so let's go back inside of here, inside of 3D Studio Max, and we're looking at the environment. We're looking at the sphere on here. I've talked to you guys about Material Editor. We've used it in some cases to do some funky stuff like the clown material for the ZBrush import. But let's talk about what we're actually looking at. In fact, in a minute, I'll probably open up one of those. That clown import setup. But let's come in here and we're going to go to M. If you go M, it's the shortcut for the material editor. You could also come over to here, which is the material editor option 2. Now, we haven't even been looking at this stuff here. I'm going to delete this for now. We haven't even been looking at this. We've been looking at it this way, just because it's the way I started with. It's super fast and easy to do what we were doing. But we're going to actually get into the Slate because it's important that you understand how this stuff works, because a lot of Unity and Unreal and other programs use this Slate type of material editor. That's why it's in here. Okay, so if you didn't catch that, all you have to do, if you're in here and you're in the wrong one, like Compact, you can change it here to Slate, going to Mode and then the Slate. Or if you want, you can even come up here and hold it to where you want. So if I'm in this one, I can go to that one. If I click on this one, I can go to that one. But let's be in the Slate here. I'm going to move the sphere over here. Now, what a material editor is allowing us, kind of like what we're doing in Substance, we're taking those textures and we're putting it on inside of 3D Studio Max. The reason I don't teach you guys a lot of this stuff is because all this stuff inside of 3D Studio Max is generally isn't PBR. And it isn't what we're going to be using inside of the materials inside of the game engine we use. 90% of the games we use anymore use PBR. Now, there are some that still use this older version of texturing or setups, the texturing map types. And the PBR is the physically based rendering system that a lot of game engines, Unity and Unreal, use. And they have different texture types that they put on the object and material types. We are going to use those more often, and that's why after we go, as soon as we go into Substance, I really rarely ever worry about putting this material on this object. But again, you never know. This is also where we render from. If you're going to do a movie, if you're going to do cartoon or videos or whatever, and you're showing 3D animatics, you need to understand where the textures are inside of here and how to make them render. There's a whole other class on rendering inside of here, and in all honesty, unless you're going to be in someplace that does those renderings and does preview animations, it's at this point not the most important thing. But I'm going to show you at least how to get the materials on the object, so once you build it, you can put it in here and look at it. I wouldn't use this for rendering my portfolio usually, but there's ways to do it that you could. And this has changed the last 3 years. We used to do everything out of here, but now with Substance or Marmoset or something, it's definitely a different deal. So right away, when we look inside of here, you'll see that even though I have this selected, there's no texture showing for it. And that's okay, because I haven't assigned one. So how do you assign a texture? You can grab from this list right here, which I rarely ever use. And in fact, I usually turn it off. So let's just turn it off right now and get you used to thinking the other way. Again, on or off. These are just convenient things to do. They aren't actually the way they need to be used. So if I want to add a material to something, I have it selected, and then I come over here to Materials. If I right click inside of this menu, I get this materials option. So the first thing I want to do is add a material. And if I go to General, I get a bunch of different types of materials. These are actually, funny enough, not the ones we want to use, because we're going to use Scanline, which is the rendering type that we have. And we're going to come down to Standard. And once we do that, Standard shows up here. I'll zoom in on it by scrolling in and out. Panning is the middle mouse button moving around. Okay. So so we have ambient color, diffuse, spec color, gloss, self-illumination, opacity, filter, bump, reflection, refraction, displacement. Diffuse is now being replaced in PBR by albedo. Specular and specular color and gloss are all being replaced by metal and roughness. So if you see those inside of Substance, that's what they're talking about. Self-illumination is emission inside of Substance, inside of game engines. Opacity, still opacity. Filter color is not in by default. Depends on what you're trying to do. Bump map This is where you actually put the normals inside of here. You have to change it to a special type of shader, but that's where it would be. Reflection actually refers to the roughness as well as the glossiness. And then refraction would be part of your opacity and doing some dances inside of there. Displacement, which would deform the mesh. Okay, so we just want to change the color of this. So what we could do is we could click on the word diffuse a couple times, or even just the whole material, and you'll see, just like in the collapsed version of the material editor, the compact, it comes up with this list right here. I'm going to name this up here, and I'll call this material 1. Okay. I am just going to roughly go over this stuff with you. If you by chance have something comes up while you're at school or in the future and you need more help with this, I've worked a lot with this material system. It changed though recently when we went to Arnold, which is the rendering system inside of here. That's the high def rendering. So I'd have to figure some stuff out. Again, I played with it, but I haven't done a lot of work. But if you do in this, during the class, during the school, if you have a teacher or somebody who wants to help you to work inside of here and expects you to know it and you're completely lost, ping me. I'll tell you how to do it. I'll get you caught up, and that'd be good to know, because then I can set up the class for the future. In general, though, I think rendering inside of 3 Studio Max is not useful for the game industry. There's plenty of other better renderers and stuff like that. Plus, we don't render. We have the game engine real-time render. All right. Except for certain occasions and specialized occasions. Okay. So we'll come back to here. I'll say diffuse. This is diffuse. You'll see it says diffuse right there. I can just take this and change the color. Okay. To, let's say, green. Okay. But you'll see nothing happened. In fact, material one's a horrible name. We're going to call this first material, and I use double A there. Okay, so it's still, nothing's changed on this. Why is that? Well, we haven't put it on, and there's that there. We haven't put it on to the actual object yet. So how do we do that? Well, we cannot grab and drag it like we could with the compact editor. Basically, what we have to do is click this little button here that says Assign to Material to Selection. So if I have that selected, I push this button, it assigns it to it. So it looks like everything's perfect, everything's good. If I wanted to, I can mess with some of the settings here. I could turn up the specular, and if I turn it up, it starts to get a higher a strength of reflection, or at least highlight. If I turn glossiness, it shows how tight that highlight is, and the higher the gloss, the more let's see, less smooth that highlight is, and the more plastic or something it looks. And there's other things we can change, like the colors, and we can change the softness and stuff, but generally that's great. So if we click this open right here, you'll also see it says maps. Let me do that again. Down here, the bottom drop down is maps. That's all these maps, which, by the way, line up exactly with all these maps. So go figure, that's what they're for. And you'll see you have places to put new extra maps and stuff. But let's say we want to put a texture on this object. Let's say we want to use a picture, for example. So to add a diffuse color, I could either click inside of here, like inside of the Slate, the other material editor, but I really want you to work inside of here. So right click and say maps, because we're not working the whole material at this point, and say general. And then you'll see you get a bunch of options. And one of those options is bitmap. And a bitmap is any picture you're importing in. All these other ones are procedural, mostly. But so we want bitmap. Click on bitmap. And I will see if I can find a picture of something. Let's see if I have something silly on my desktop. Here. So I have this picture. And if you look at it, it's a picture of Kratos and his kid, and the girl from Horizon Zero Dawn teaching him how to shoot a bow, because that's what she did. And it's a happy family, yay. Nice. Somebody drew this, can't remember who. It's really cute. So if I want to make this work, I throw this texture by clicking on that this dot, and now I'm going to drag it anywhere I want it to go, but what I'm looking for to drag it to is a place to attach it to. So the way Slate Editor works is it says this external element can be attached, and you can attach it to several places. That's the cool thing. I don't know if I can attach it. Yeah, I can attach it to even several places here. But that is the idea, is that you have these encapsulated control points, these textures or whatever they may be, and they can be used across the surfaces. And when you start getting into Substance Designer, this is hugely what they do, and they get really complicated, but it's really awesome once you get used to it. So now I have this picture in the diffuse color, and lo and behold, nothing's changed. Okay, so by default, when you throw a texture on the object, it's not going to map the image that you put on there. It's just going to map the color changes that we've done, because the color works, but the highlights work, but not the texture map. So to get that to work, we need to click on this button up here where it shows this checkerboard sphere, and if I say show shaded material in viewport, you click on it, and now that texture is showing up on the object. Okay, that's one of those key things, and you can tell by the unwrap that it's all yahooed. Okay, that's one of the things that you have to get used to, is to remember. This is an easy one to forget. It's like when you're inside a substance and you forget to bake the materials first thing, somehow it's not working correctly. Well, always remember to check this. Have the object selected and make sure this is on. Because if I don't have that on and I click off of it, even if I turn this on and off and this isn't attached to it, it's not going to make a difference. So turn that on. There you go. Now let's talk about, so that's a picture. That's the diffuse channel, right? So we have that set up. What if we wanted to put this into, let's say, the bump? Well, all we do is drag that dot, which you saw me do earlier, and throw it onto there. And if it actually had something to do, it would do it right there. But as you can tell, the bump's turned way down there. And there's really not enough information to make this look right. So let me turn the specular down and see if I can get it to show up a little bit better. Yeah, the bump map is, on a white thing, it's just not going to work too great. But let's try a different bump map. So I'll take this and I'll drag it off, and then I'll come over here, say materials, and say general, and I'm sorry, maps, not materials, and then say checkerboard. And for some reason, there. Okay, I do want to point this out too. This may or may not happen. If you have this selected, this object selected, and you put that on, that, and see how it's red, that's different than having the whole material show up. So if I do it, if I do it now, it's different, and this is red, meaning this is the control. This may be why it didn't show up before too. No, it's just really not strong enough. So, plus it's a sphere and it's unwrapped weird. I'm going to take this checkerboard and I'm going to drag its dot to bump and see if we can get anything to show up. Let me turn off this. There. Yeah, I'm not even seeing it at all. Yay, bump map. So, let me come back up to here, make sure I have everything showing up. We'll just get rid of this for now. Oh, it's still down to 30. Huh. That's funny. It's not working great. Let's see if it's just because it's a sphere. Let's drag a box out here. Front C. And we'll throw that same material on it. And, let me see, maybe, let me check one more thing here. Oh, that's why. Because it doesn't show up in the real-time viewport. Again, another reason that it doesn't make sense to use this, because you're not actually seeing real-time changes to this object. You could try and see if we change it to higher quality, if it'll show up. Yeah, so the high quality, there you go. It shows up on a high quality. But by default, if it's not working, always check and see if your standard mode is set up. DirectX mode, it doesn't show up either, which is hilarious. So anyway, there you go. So I've got it showing up now, and I've got these. So I'm going to try and see what happens if I do this again. And this. And come up here, make sure it's all showing up. And there you go. You can see there's little bitty bumps around it. And if you can't see that, let me do this. There you go. So bump map only looks at the light and dark values of the object. So because of that, it's only showing me where it seems darker and lighter, and you can see how it's breaking it up and the resolution and all that stuff. But I could also say negative and make it invert that extrusion, the fake extrusion. So if I turn this back onto here, you'll see, there it is. So let's take that off and let's try some other stuff. Let's see, this may be a good map to use for this anyway. So what else can we do? What else are we looking to do? I'm gonna get rid of that by pushing delete. If I drag this one onto spec level, let's see what we get. Okay, so as you can see, what it's gonna do is wherever it's light, it's gonna show you specular highlights, and wherever it's dark, it will pull back on. So if we look at this and we turn it around, and by the way, it overwrites what you have in here. If I change this to 0, it won't change a thing in here. But there you go. You can kind of see there's his arm and his head, and there's his face, and that's all just a highlight. If I pull this glossiness out and make it bigger, you'll see that highlight, that reflection shows up on that texture. So that's kind of cool because now you can see how that works. It's just using the darks and lights of this object to make the specular highlights define better. Let's try glossiness. We'll pull this down, go to here. Now, we're not going to see it too well because the specular level is really low, so let me turn that back up. So, all of a sudden, one of the things I want you to realize is it's inverted, right? So if we looked at this, before, it was the darker areas that get receded, meaning they don't get the highlights from the specular, but the lighter areas get the highlight from the specular and the darker areas get pushed back. Well, it's the opposite for gloss, and honestly, it's the opposite for roughness. The lighter areas are the active areas, and the darker areas are the inactive areas. And the reason that is because you're basically saying positive and negative. If I want something highlighted, I positive that, and that's the area that's being pushed back. So anyway, this is how that works. And if I do both, let's see what happens. Specular level, bam. Now I'll get a sharper in some areas and darker in others. And now it's going to give me this. See how that highlight's working now? Again, let me turn that off, and it's just all over. I put the gloss back on, and now it's giving me control over the specular highlight that it's going to use in certain areas. Whereas if I turn this off, it's just, oops, I don't know where my sphere went. There it is. It's doing that. Now ignore this down here. That's a reflective, bad math stuff. So, you know, it's really cool that you can take this and make this highlight now scroll across the object a lot more understandably. Okay. So that's specular and gloss. Self-illumination, let's turn these two off. And if I take this and throw it on self-illumination, you'll see that the areas that, and what we're seeing here, let me turn down this highlight here, is that the areas that are white are illuminated and the areas that are not illuminated. So what that means is that the white is brighter and the dark is less bright. So why isn't it showing color? Because this doesn't define the color. It's not the way the engines work. A lot of times self-illumination or emission actually controls the color that comes out of the object. But in this case, it doesn't for self-illumination. If I take and drag this up to diffuse too, you'll see now it's brighter in some areas and darker in others. And let me print that highlight back on real quick. Okay. So see how that highlight moves across and then suddenly it disappears? And it maybe you think because it's white, but really it's because when you have a self-illuminated thing, it first off, it kills your shadows. So you can see there's no shadows in this area. And second off, it won't pick up highlights because it's overwriting the highlight too. So we'll take that off. Opacity. So in theory, this should be completely opaque and this darker stuff should start to have transparencies to it. So let's see. There we go. And it's seeing through itself, and the inside of it, it's actually not using the opacity because that's not the way opacity works by default. You can come inside of here and see if it's two-sided, if it works. So it's still not really showing what we would think it would show. But again, what we're seeing here, oh, here, I can do it this way. Come here, grab this, say object properties. For it to not show the interior because it's really not there, I have to turn on backface call and say okay. And that's unexpected. Turn this off. Oh, because it's gradations, what I'm seeing is part of this seeing through to the gray. It just looks like it's green. I'll turn off the highlight too. So in this case, I'm going to use a different map just to explain it better. I'm going to untake this one off. I'll come down here, go to maps, go to general, and we'll check out that checker again because it's really straightforward. Take this, and we'll throw the checker onto the opacity, and now you can see what I'm seeing. It's just because this color, they weren't stark black and white, it was gradation, so it looked like it was seeing through, and our background is so neutral that it kind of it fooled what we were actually looking at. But that's really what's going on. If I throw this picture back on here, oops, that, there you go. Okay, so that's cool. Reflection, honestly, that should be done with math, but you can fake it. So let's take this off. I'll take this and delete it. We'll drag this one to reflection. And basically, it's just trying to deform the shape so it looks like it's reflecting on the object. It's out of the picture. So really, you don't see the object being textured. It's supposed to be reflection outside of the object. And the sharper that is, or the less you have on your reflection amount, so it's at 100, if I do 50, we'll see more and more. Let's do 20 or 10. We'll see more of the object here. Push the wrong button. So there you go. See how it's turning around now, and it just seems more like a reflection. You'll see that it's higher over here in the differential highlights and stuff. Okay, and refraction, I'm not even sure what this was going to do. Refraction is a very high-end math thing, so a picture doesn't work great on it. If you want refraction, the best thing to do is, and by the way, I think you can also do it this way, and then pick from here if you drag out. I'm going to go to general, and then I'm going to come down to ray trace, because what that does is it kind of like a normal, it'll shoot out a light. The problem with ray trace in this case is that it's seeing through itself and seeing nothing on the other side. So let's see if we put this back in here, if we get anything better now. Specular is, or refraction is actually a hugely mathematical thing that a lot of game systems don't do. And that's why glasses in games look like crap. Okay. And for rendering though, it may actually, that's probably another thing. It may not show up till you render. Let me see if I render here. Yeah, it still doesn't show up. You need to have something to refract against. There's no plane, there's nothing refracting. If I put a plane down here, it still may not. Yeah, it's just not made for this kind of setup. I mean, obviously. Refraction, just a higher end mathematical calculation, and if it comes up, then we can work with it and make it work the way you want. Like I said, they also changed their renderers recently, so it's a little bit of a dance. Okay, so that said, that's the basics of Material Editor. I'm not going to go through every map type because every map type, there's just so many options. We could spend weeks on Material Editor if we knew we were going to be rendering everything. So if I right click here, or if I even better yet, we'll come out to here, you'll see there's tons of map types. Maps, there's also tons of environmental maps. There's some pre-made ones, and the scanline renderer doesn't work for the OSL. And then there's some, let's see, general, scanline, architectural ones in here somewhere too, which I haven't used in a while. So yeah, they're in here somewhere. We aren't going to use them because we're going to build all our textures and put all our shaders on everything instead of Substance Painter or Designer eventually, and then we're going to use that straight into Unity. But I want to show you one more key thing that that may happen. When I'm going to open up our kaleidoscope sword here. Let's see if I can find it, or clown sword. I'll go to here, go to my thumb drive, to this class, files, week 12, clown. Okay. So when we were making this, let me see what's going on here. Where's my clown sword? There we go. Okay. So when we were making this, we threw a bunch of textures on there. And if we look at my material editor, let's do this. Oops, that's not it. Material editor. We'll go to our modes, our compact editor. And then we used to have a bunch of different textures on here, and I've cleaned them out. But all we did is take one and drag it, take one and drag it, and all that stuff, right? Well, unbeknownst to you, what you are actually doing is making what's called a multi-sub texture, meaning that each one of these faces has a different texture, so this object has multi-textures on it, multi-shaders, multi-materials. So if I took an eyedropper, which is how you can see what materials on an object, inside of here, and I click this button and then went over to here, you'll see that, bam, it shows me every material I've added to this object are all listed out here, including apparently I left default on here somewhere. Or it may have just added it to it. You can change the number by set number and all this stuff, but let's talk about how this looks like inside of the Slate editor. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of these. If you delete textures out of here, they aren't gone. What you can do is you can come to the sample slots, or you can come to, if you have this open, you can scroll down to the bottom, sample slots. You'll see the only textures that are available really are the non-textures and then this one right here. So if I double click this, it opens it up. And let me show you that again by doing it this way, since I don't use this very often. If I right click here and say sample slots and pick on multi-sub, if I had named it been better, well, let's take a look at what we're seeing here. Okay, so automatically we see this is a multi-sub texture. There's 2 or 3 ways to do this. You could have said general and come over here and created a multi-sub by default, and it'll make these textures for you. And then you could have built out each texture, assigned it to each object, and had that dance. Or you could do it like we did it and just add a new material every face that you want to have a new material. The point is both ways work and both ways make this multi-sub. And if we look at this, you'll see that this multi-sub yellow is now attached to 4. If I open this up, you'll see there's 4. If I want to go down to the sub menu 4, I clicked here and it's this right here. But you'll notice I'm looking at this material. All this is a hub to hold all your stuff, all the materials you're using. It doesn't really do anything else but define. I mean, you can do other things with it, I think. There we go. But all it really does is hold all the object. There's not a lot to do inside of here. This is just everything comes out of here like bonk, that's where it's going. Okay. So we have all these textures, and you'll see there's standard and the red. But if we really want to change those textures, we come over to here and double click, and there it is. So how would I make this inside of the Slate material editor? Let me delete what we have here. If I was going to do it, I don't like making multi-sub and then trying to attach that way. It just gets unorganized in my head that way. So what I like to do is just say materials, scanline, standard, double click on this, change whatever color you want it to be. This pink, almost pink. Change the name to pink. I guess we're going to call it pink, and I love how I always add that extra. I should make it, okay. There. Pink. So, there. So now I come over here, make this a little bit smaller, modify, select face, grab this face here, and then I can just drag it. Oh gosh, that's right, you can't. just do it this way. Maybe you can. Let me see something. No. So whatever face you select, then you make a new one. And then I would take this and like everything in Max, when you make a copy of something, you shift and drag a copy. It's going to see that the material name, and by the way, it left itself on here even though I copied a new one. You'll see the material name is the same. It's changed. Actually, it's not the same. So we're going to call this Blanc. There's my capital L again. Come in here and say, there, I'm going to call there, I'm going to call that Blanc. And then I would just do the same thing. I'd grab a different face and throw it onto there. Okay, so now I've had 2 more textures on there. So what did that do to our multi-sub texture? Well, let's find out. If you want to select an object's texture inside of here, get out of the sub-object mode, you click on this and then click. And now you'll see I have Blanc added to it and purple and pink. Okay. So there you go. We got 2 new colors added to it, and you can do that simply, or you can do it from the beginning. Now, I mean, to me, again, the compact material editor is the easier way to do this, but you really need to get used to thinking this way because as we get more complicated, this is the way it is. And again, all we're doing is making a multi-sub which has a bunch of hookups to it that match to that size. Okay? And don't be afraid. If I delete this, nothing goes away. If I hold this, it comes right back. So that's it for Material Editor. Get you some basic stuff. Again, if things come up in the future and you need some help with it and we have to figure out some more dances, I will question why, but I will help you. Because I feel like if I haven't taught you what they need you to know, then you can come to me for it. All right? So that said, I will see you guys in a little bit.